Hi, this is Nancy Live. I'm speaking to you for the Planet Peace Project. This is one of the videos for what I call the Micropeace series. Now, um, I would like to mention a beautiful essay I read recently called it says, "The day I realized I wasn't my husband's wife anymore." And it was written by Elaine Roth, Roth. I will put a link to that essay in the area below this video. Elaine and her husband were married for, I think, about 10 years. And she said that for the first 9 of those, they weathered any storm. And she said marriage was very beautiful. She said marriage is like, and no matter what the world tries to put between them, there was one that they couldn't quite sail through, and that was tumors in the brain of my husband. His behavior changed, his personality changed, and then ultimately his ability to remember the day before changed. It must have been very much like losing someone to dementia. And the person you love and want to read simply isn't there anymore. And she said that the day she realized she wasn't his wife anymore, but had become his caretaker instead and his guardian, was when he couldn't remember anything and his behavior changed to where he wasn't even the person she recognized. Well, then she said something really beautiful. She said, instead of being his wife and his partner and his cohort, she was going to be his anchor and she was going to be his home. And I thought, well, ultimately, isn't that still being his wife, you know? But it was really very beautiful and poignant the way she said that she was going to be his advocate. And I think, I don't mean to split hairs, but ultimately, Elaine Roth was still that man's wife. I'm going to really try not to cry through this because it was so beautiful and poignant. Ultimately, he did pass away. And when he was in hospice care, she realized that the hard work was done and there was nothing else to do. And now the nurses had taken over. And she didn't have to check temperature or just sit there and hold his hand. She said once she didn't have to be his caretaker anymore, she became his wife. And they went through the storm of his losing his life together. I personally believe in the immortal soul. And I know that those two people are going to find each other in the golden light of eternal love. And they're going to sail on. What gets to me is that the vast majority of us will never know that kind of love. Many people would get married. Many people would get divorced. And some people, probably fewer than get divorced, will stay married and stick and stay in relationships that have soured into some kind of form of prison for decades. Just because you're married doesn't mean you're happily married. And I've heard a lot of people who've been married for 20 or 30 years say that the term happy marriage is an oxymoron. Well, it doesn't have to be. And I think the reason most people will never know the kind of love that Elaine Roth and her husband had is because most people don't have the emotional maturity, confidence, and the dedication to do the work. Marriage is not an easy thing. Romance may be. People have people form romantic relationships and oxytocin and all kinds of hormonal changes that occur biologically when people think they've fallen in love. And those hormonal changes tend to dissipate after the first 3 to 4 months of a relationship. Certainly after 6 months, after you've fallen in love with someone and have all those feelings of elation, and you just feel like you're a captive audience for them, the hormonal changes tend to change and dissipate and become less strong. And that, my friends, that is when dedication comes in. That is when you hope that you have gotten together with someone with whom you have very important commonalities and intriguing dissimilarities. Ultimately, um, sometimes I think that we're all looking for our clone. We all want someone who is basically so much alike us that we never have to argue with them or disagree about anything. But you know that's not going to happen. Your clone isn't out there. People get together for two reasons, from what I can tell: commonalities and differences. The commonalities provide a place to stand, a firm grounding. Your similarities are what's going to be your mainstay, your foundation. But your dissimilarities, your differences, are what's going to keep it interesting. And hopefully, the complementarity, the way this person is different from this person, will serve the union, will help survival occur, and will even keep love alive. So, the irony that I've seen, frankly, all of my life, and I'm talking about from elementary school through high school, through college, through adulthood, is that people get together for their commonalities. They have along fairly well initially. Their differences intrigue them and stimulate them until they get together and stay there for a while. And lo and behold, very quickly in a lot of relationships, usually within the first weeks or months, the dissimilarities are what each person tries to change in the other. So, a classic example might be extroversion and introversion. One person who's sort of serious and introverted and philosophical and intellectual might be attracted to the extrovert, the life of the party, the bubbly, ebullient person who's very charming and gregarious. But lo and behold, and vice versa, the extroverted person might sort of envy and appreciate the more stoic, uh, intellectual, philosophical, quiet, introverted person that they get together with. But lo and behold, right, right out of the gate, those two people might be trying to change each other because the introvert finds the extroversion of the more ebullient person to be threatening, and the ebullient, life of the party, bubbly person finds the introverted intellectualism of his or her philosopher mate to be sort of like a stick in the mud. They want the person to be more lively and friendly and bubbly. So you've got to see these things coming in, people. You've got to be able to look your differences in the face and say, are they significant enough to where we won't be able to get along over the course of time? Or are they interesting enough and useful enough so that they will actually serve the relationship and the union and make us better partners? Um, One example I can think of right offhand is, let's say somebody is really very well versed in things like biology and medicine and health, and someone else is more the techno whiz. Someone else knows so much more about computers and electronics and mechanics. Well, that person might be the one fixing the car and the computer, and the other person might be the one controlling the health and the diet and the nutritional aspects of the family and the children and so forth. You see where I'm going with this? I think Elaine Roth must be one of the most fortunate people on the planet. And to say that about someone whose husband just died of brain cancer must seem strange, but that woman had something that most of us never will. She had a 10-year marriage that was so incredibly admirable and beautiful, to devote themselves that the way that she and her husband did. it becomes a question of whether or not you have what it takes to be in that kind of situation. I have known people who lost their spouse when they themselves got cancer. I knew a woman in Texas whose husband divorced her when and because she got breast cancer. And she would cry, and I would say, "You did not suffer a loss. That was not a mate. That was not a man worth having. You've got friends. You're better off without someone who is so shallow and so disrespectful of your challenges that he would abandon you at that point." I know of another situation where a man divorced his wife when she got senile dementia. And they were older. I think they were in their late 60s or 70s, but he was gone for cognitive abilities. So those are not the kinds of relationships that really matter now, are they? It is going to take tremendous strength of character to be in a relationship. And if you don't have that strength of character and you don't have the dedication to a partnership, you shouldn't try to get in one. Not everyone needs to mate. We are not all yins in search of yang and yangs in search of yin. People can have different types of interactions socially, and not everyone needs to get married. Not everyone should. That in itself is sort of a controversial and outlandish thing for anyone to say because we live in a society that tends to pressure everyone to pair off, but it's not necessarily the right thing for people to do. And there are plenty of people who are really better off if they decide to live solitary lives and move forward on that basis. Just remember that romance is easy, but marriage is hard. And romance is not anywhere near enough to make a good marriage. It takes real work and real maturity to have what Elaine Roth and her husband had. And I just really, really want to say that I honor and admire what they achieved together. He may be gone, but he will never be forgotten. And they will catch up with each other again. I'm sure of it.